What's going on, everybody? Welcome and welcome back to my channel, Bareface Diamond. My name is Ezra. If you are new here, this video was not planned, so I'm going to get right into it. But for transparency purposes, today is July 20th. You may not see this until the first or second week of August, but it's all good because it'll still be valid at that time. As you know, I am going through a systematic theology class, but I'm also reading for fun the book by Peter Scazzero called Emotionally Healthy Discipleship. And what those two books and the Emotionally Healthy Spirituality book, even though I'm not reading it right now, I read that at the end of the year. Reading the Emotionally Healthy Discipleship brings back a lot of memories of the Emotionally Healthy Spirituality book, as well as getting into the systematic theology books that I have. One of the things that I am learning is to be quiet even more and listen to God even more and pay attention to what I'm reading and really take in what I'm reading. And I say that because as I'm rebuilding my relationship with God, as I have been on this run to continue to experience God, what I'm learning is that number one, just because we see people out here doing all kind of things doesn't mean that God's hand is not on that individual. Just because you say you go to church every Sunday or you involved in this ministry or that ministry or you read the Bible every day or whatever the case may be, don't mean that you're going to heaven. It doesn't. We don't know what God sees about you that will keep you from going to heaven. And you may not know what God sees to keep you from going to heaven. We may not know what God sees to bring somebody that you know they're just full of damnation that God will turn around and say, no, they're coming to heaven. He still has his hand on all his people. It made me sit back because I used to be that person like, nope, this person not going to heaven. This person not going to heaven. I'm gonna go to heaven. And it's like, that's right. Who are you to say who's going to heaven and who's not? Who told you was going to heaven? That's why I'm so big on healing. That's why I'm so big on forgiveness. As I read the Bible the first time all the way through, and I'm currently going through that season, but I'm not doing it, reading the Bible in the year because, I mean, who came up with that? I mean, okay, fine, whatever, but take your time reading the Word of God because it's vitally important. But as I've been reading His Word, you guys, I have been learning that just because you think you're doing all the right things, there might be something that you did in your past that you haven't thought about or that you have thought about, but you're like, yeah, no, I'm good on that. That's in the past that God still sees. There may be somebody that did something to you or said something to you that you did not forgive. And God is going to say, well, hold up. What about this person right there? You didn't forgive them, so why should I forgive you? And I've said this in multiple videos. We always ask God for forgiveness for every little stupid thing that we do. And He doesn't flinch. He forgives us right then and there. But we don't want to forgive other people, no matter what they did to us. Y'all, I was abused growing up in many ways. I had to forgive not only the abuser, because or the abusers, I had to look and say, you know what, in order for them to have done that to me, somebody had to do that to them. I had to forgive them. I had to forgive other people because I thought had they been around, this wouldn't have happened. I had to forgive myself for thinking somebody else allowed it to happen. I had to forgive myself for that. And I had to forgive myself for blaming them. And I had to forgive them for blaming them. So I had to forgive myself for blaming them, and I had to forgive them I had to ask them for forgiveness for me blaming them. You understand what I'm saying? I had to do a whole lot of forgiving for some things that happened to me when I was a child. It was like I had to forgive one, two, three, four people, well, five if you include me. I had to forgive five people for events that happened to me as a child that I had no control over, that I assumed other people had control over. I had to forgive all of those people. I had to forgive myself for how I treated myself. I had to forgive my father. And I wasn't really able to forgive my father until he got sick, when he had nobody else to depend on to get him through his slow transition from um from life to, okay, eternity. I had to forgive him. It caused me a lot of stress. Um, but I was not going to let my father just be lost out in the street somewhere. I just wasn't going to do that. So I had to forgive him, and I did tell him. I let him know. And it was funny because it wasn't designed like this, but at the time that I told him that I had forgave him, he couldn't talk. He could, and I'm not saying it is funny, but he couldn't talk. And I want to say, now that I look back on it, that was the perfect opportunity because he could not interrupt me. Okay, I was able to get everything out that I had been holding in, because when I tried to talk to him before, he would cut me off because he was in his feelings. And I didn't understand it at the time, but I understood it when he was during his last year and a half of life. That it wasn't that he wasn't listening to me, it wasn't that he wasn't hearing me. It was that he felt bad for not being there for me when things went left in my life. And I never saw it from that vantage point until after he, like I said, after he was in his last year and a half of life. So I had to do a lot of healing, and I had to learn that just because I proclaim to love Jesus, and that just because I proclaim to follow Jesus and proclaim to follow God, does not necessarily mean that he's going to look at me and say, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." It does not mean that he's going to say, "I know you." It could very well mean that he says, "Depart from me, for I never knew you." So we have to really be careful about how we treat people, how we treat ourselves, and what we deem to be unforgivable or sin or anything like that, because we all sin every day. We do. If you want to look at it like that, everybody want to. We all sin every single day, but people want to put sin in different tiers. And if I'm not mistaken, my Bible says a sin is a sin, no matter what it is, regardless, no matter what it is, except the blasphemy. That's isn't that like the greatest of the sins? But the rest of them, a sin is a sin is a sin, no matter what it is. So if you rolling your eyes at somebody, if you're sitting, or if you're in the same room with somebody that you just cannot stand, or that you just can't deal with, you have to figure out a way to overcome that emotion, because it's going to eat away at you and eat away at you. And one day you might find yourself snapping off on somebody for no reason, and they don't even know why you're snapping off on them. You understand? That has happened. I have done that. I have snapped off on somebody, and I had to go back. It took me like 2 weeks to apologize, because I didn't feel like I was wrong, of course. But at the end of the day, I was wrong. So we really have to work on our healing. We have to work on being better to ourselves, because if we're better to ourselves, we can be better to everybody else. I have seen, I'm in this group, I think I said it before in another video, Black Girls Who Read, where I posted up that I was reading a book a few months ago, Forgiving What You Can't Forget. And there was a young lady that said, I just move on. I'm good. I just move on. No, that is not what God wants us to do. That is not what Jesus requires us to do. Jesus requires us to forgive people. He requires us to forgive people. That's why you have heard me in several of my videos state, and I believe I said this earlier, we ask God for forgiveness all the time and he doesn't flinch. But when people want our forgiveness, we send them through hell and high water, and then we still send them through some more stuff. And then we don't forgive them. We sit there and say, "Well, yeah, I know you did all that, but I can't forgive you." We're committing a sin when we do that. I personally believe that. I personally believe that. When you are free to admit your faults and admit all your faults and admit when you've done something wrong in the moment, I personally think that God is not going to look at you and say you're not worth anything. He's not, because as many times as I have done stuff and did people wrong, I've had to go back and apologize to those individuals and ask them for forgiveness because of it. Now that I recognize when I do stuff, immediately I know that's right. I sit there and say, "I'm sorry, God." There was a couple times last week where I was upset, and I said something, and I said, "God, I know I said it. I did say it. I didn't mean it to come out the way it came out, but I meant what I said. It came out very harsh. It came out very aggressive. And that individual did not deserve the tone that I used. I apologize to God. I apologize to that individual. I asked that individual for their forgiveness, but I did tell them I'm apologizing and asking for forgiveness for the way I said what I said, but I meant what I said. Okay. And they understood that and they accepted my apology. They were shocked that I came to apologize for stating the truth. You can state the truth, but you don't have to state the truth in an ugly manner. Okay. So just be careful on the assumptions that you place on people. Be careful on how you talk to people. Be careful how you treat people. Be careful about telling somebody else that what they did was wrong or what they did was a sin when you still got a log in your eye. Be careful with that because God sees that too. And with that, I'll see you on another video. Bye.